Good afternoon, everyone. Ted Tanner, Principal Assurance Consultant here at AWS Security Assurance Services. We are a QSAC. We help customers achieve, maintain, automate compliance in the cloud.
Hello, everyone. Bruno Kovacs from Carbon Care, the French local car brand. I'm the head of security standards with CBEAD.
And hello, everyone. My name is Troy Leach. I am with the Cloud Security Alliance. It is a nonprofit that does a lot of standards and research on cybersecurity. And what we're going to be here today to talk about in just 20 minutes is really how the evolution of collaboration with cloud service providers has happened with the payment industry. Now, for a little bit of context, we had this dramatic shift that happened in our industry. And what happened was, and I recall this, because for those that don't know my background, about 17 years of my life was spent creating the PCI Council and helping lead with a lot of amazing people here at this organization. And in the early days, we had to address cloud distribution and understanding what that meant for putting things into a third party's environment. And there was a lot of pointing of fingers and blaming when there was early breaches or inability to get a PCI or report of compliance done. And what we've seen over time, though, is with this dramatic type of evolution of the collaboration. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is this shared responsibility and how you can have the tools and some new techniques possibly to work with your cloud service providers and other third parties to achieve PCI DSS compliance in your environments. So for us, I think the new appendix for the multi-tenant service provider is a great example of how we can leverage not only for PCI, but all of the many regulations that are out there. So I do work a lot with European regulators, mostly around DORA and Cybersecurity Act and EU AI Act, and other things of that nature. But you'll notice that the same principles within the multi-tenant service provider requirements will actually help these cloud providers achieve other forms of government regulation as well. So for me, I look at it's a collaboration of just not one entity working with another, but it's a real collective, and that starts with internal organizations. We see the procurement teams, the security teams becoming much more aware of when a PCI and governance team needs their ability to help achieve some form of demonstration of due diligence with their third parties. We now see that there's some tools within the framework, the PCI DSS framework, to do that. In particular, being able to show and achieve this form of separation in an environment. In fact, in the early days, I do recall that I went to a security conference with several of the PCI security team, the standards team, and we were in the audience, and a gentleman was leading a professor from a renowned university. And I'm not going to shame any professor or university. I will say Mark Meisner in the other track, he possibly roots for this university on Saturdays, but I'm not going to disclose what university that is. But he was talking about in 2010 how he's going to become PCI compliant and have this separation. And I really didn't understand at the time, because really the tools were not mature, the orchestration, the ability to have these virtual domains just didn't exist with the cloud service providers. And so he gave this presentation, and during Q&A, I did get up to the microphone and ask a clarifying question because I thought he maybe misrepresented PCI DSS. To which he told me he had spoken with the PCI Council, in particular Troy Leach, and he had gotten an endorsement for this. At that time, I did put into the microphone, my name was Troy Leach from the PCI Council, and I didn't quite see eye to eye with his conclusions. But that's where we were in this ability of, like, how do we use these tools, how do we work with cloud service providers to achieve this type of good validation? So the other part that I look at is the multi-tenant service providers and that partnership and how that has grown and starting to use shared security responsibility model in order to achieve good validation and demonstration that not only third parties, but fourth parties, fifth parties, and it's becoming just even more complex. We had, last week I was having lunch at a dinner, at a lunch with CISOs that had the global head economist for Vanguard come in and said just in the last year, they've seen more than 5,000 applications for IPOs for new AI companies, really, which is just an extension of other types of multi-tenant service providers. So we're going to have to find ways to have a very clear form of shared security responsibility within that. And then it also comes within the integration ourselves of our assessors, having good consistency. I applaud the PCI Council. I've heard them referenced in the use of moving to machine language capabilities. We do that with all of our frameworks at CSA as well. And what that's going to create is it's going to create, when you're taking that machine language and putting in, you can start to track in real time your compliance and other security health. So you can start to do continuous monitoring, security automation, and harmonizing all of these tools within your organization and how they meet and relate to PCI DSS compliance in real time. So my last slide, just before I turn it off to these two gentlemen, is there are some other tools you may or may not be aware of for cloud service providers, recognizing we all probably have hundreds to literally thousands of service providers we are using in any type of a payment environment. One thing to be cognizant of is we do have a free database repository online. You can go and see if these third-party cloud providers have actually validated. It is mapped to PCI DSS 4, and so you can see where there's a gap and where there's opportunity. And the most important part of that is for each and every control, it has a shared security responsibility. So the service providers are validating, is this matching to, is it a cloud customer, cloud user, cloud, probably a third party, tertiary party. In all of that is a way for you to have, okay, I can have now a good conversation with my cloud provider as to what the environment looks like. As for that, now let's take it to an example with Bruno.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Troy. I'm going to bring this down to a concrete example, as you said, which is moving our digital cards provisioning platform from a high security facility to the public cloud. So this isn't just a random server farm. This platform protects the crown jewels of multiple card issuers, and not only cardholder data, but master keys used to issue digital cards on their behalf. Our migration journey started in 2022 when mobile payments were starting to ramp up in France. And just to give you a sense of the stakes, according to a public national report, in 2022, we counted over 800 million mobile payment transactions, all brands included, in France. In 2024, over 2.5 billion transactions. And our platform continues to support tens of thousands of card enrollments every day. So as we needed to scale, the potential benefits of the cloud were huge, but also were the risks. So this represented a massive paradigm shift to us, as on premises, our environment was sitting right there in front of us, and we had complete oversight over it. Moving to the cloud would mean swapping the physical barriers for logical security controls, such as identity and access management, or MFA. It would also mean fragmenting our operations across several third parties, reducing our oversight, and even the risk of being pulled into foreign jurisdiction. So the question we asked ourselves was simple but daunting. Could we move this critical platform to the cloud and still sleep at night? Okay, so the answer came only through collaboration. So first, we needed to define a common language to talk about security with our TPSPs. And as we were being very cautious and paying attention to cloud security risks, we looked into a number of options and finally decided to build a framework on top of the Cloud Security Alliance Cloud Controls Matrix, but by adding payment-specific context to it and refining some of the control specifications to better reflect our own security posture. So just for example, we require our direct TPSPs to own and manage the HSMs and cryptographic keys to fully shield our most sensitive assets. Another example is we required this platform to be deployed across multiple regions in Europe to meet our data residency and service availability requirements as well. Of course, we also rely on PCI DSS to protect account data, which formed a great framework bundle, I would say. So combination of PCI and CSA initiatives work pretty well. Then we had to talk about regulations. So regulations like DORA and GDPR, they just don't stop at our doorstep. They also apply to our providers. So we had to sit down together. We had to discuss about roles and responsibilities, put the right contracts in place. And most important, I would say, was to actually understand how their programs could work for us, too. One example about GDPR, for example, was that as our TPSPs were acting as data processors and sub-processors for personal data, we leveraged their data privacy programs. Then we had to talk about shared responsibilities, because in the cloud, it's very easy to assume someone else has things covered. So we had to map exactly who does what, to avoid gaps and finger pointing, as you were saying before. Finally, transparency. Transparency was also very important, because some of the issues we had to face, they were not about technology, they were about service agreements. So we had to rewrite parts of those service agreements together to make sure the commitments were crystal clear. So that's what turned to us governance from a burden into a shared foundation. But governance alone wasn't enough. We also needed business alignment. So to us, that meant three things. First, as this migration wasn't a lift and shift, we had to redesign a few components, and we needed to make sure that our proprietary API was working and implemented correctly. So we developed a few testing tools, which we made available to our business partners, connecting to that platform, so they test and make sure everything was correct before they connected to the new environment. Second, it was about continuity that could be proven, because nowadays we cannot, we just don't want it only contractual uptime numbers. We wanted the actual ability to run resilience tests together. And third, freedom of movement. To us, that was important, because to avoid lock-in, we required some level of interoperability and exit options, because we considered resilience not to be only technical, but to be also strategic. So that's what made our migration possible, but not only possible, it made this collaboration with service providers really part of our business strategy in the long run. And that's all for me. I'll pass it on to Ted.
Thanks, Bruno. Great insights, a very real-world example. It's very practical, but some of the challenges people have with their cloud service providers. As Troy highlighted at the beginning, we need to move away from the us versus them mentality to we're in this together. Whether you like it or not, your cloud provider, your hyperscale, is part of your infrastructure. People need to treat them as partners, as just close vendors, not just third party that you're being held at arm's length. And that's the only way you're really going to get sustainable success. I mean, the first critical step is treating them like your extended team. If you have a relationship with a cloud provider, you have an account manager, you may have an account team. Talk to them, work with them, shift from, oh, they're just the liaison, to, hey, they're a partner. They care about your success just like you do. So leverage them. Cloud providers invest more in security than probably anyone else in the world. They have some fantastic advancements. Use it. Goes into how Troy described as the mindset shift. Stop treating them as just like one person in your third-party risk management program, and treat them as an extension of your security team, as your IT team. And understand, as you do that, what the boundaries are. You need to know where your capabilities stop and their start. And as was mentioned, the detailed shared responsibility model, because it differs by cloud service, it differs sometimes by feature of a service. And this is true for AWS or GCP or Azure or any other cloud provider in the world. All services are not created equal. You need to define it, you need to document it, and you need to know that when something goes bump in the night, where do you pick up and where do they pick up? And then what tools do they have that you can leverage? The service provider security investments, they have a lot of great tools out there, the fantastic incident response support that you can leverage. If something happens in your account, you can call them and they probably have at least as much visibility into the traffic going into your environment as you do. I mean, they own the infrastructure. So take advantage of it. And even beyond that, cloud offers a lot of other capabilities. Automation is the wave of the future. Honestly, getting people out of the loop, getting away from the manual processes, the error-prone processes, and introduce the automation to just accelerate your use and more importantly, accelerate your ability to monitor your risk of your cloud environment. It's required for PCI. Requirement 10 is big on log gathering, log monitoring. But every other framework out there, too, cares about the same thing. Have your logs, watch your logs. So core partnership foundations. And then once you have that, operationalize it. Work on policy-driven governance. Everyone's a fan of using the term shift left. Implement it. And care both about the application stack, your SDLC, that's the most common attention point that people care about, but it's just as applicable to your platform. If you're running infrastructure as code, implement policy as code there too, compliance as code. Enforce your security guardrails that map back to your compliance requirements, such as PCI. You can enforce your requirements for hardened images, for requirement 2, for patching requirements to make sure that you're part of the right patch process, make sure your images have the right anti-malware tools, endpoint EDR tools, all of the above. So use automation, use the service provider tools to incorporate the policy-driven governance. And you can easily centralize it, which is great for a whole lot of organizations. You extremely amplify your observability of what you have in the cloud today. And then for the executive standpoint, you get the automation ROI. The return on investment is just compounding as you introduce the automation and leverage your cloud provider services to kind of accelerate things and kind of set into stone the security of your environment. They have built-in guardrails. You can use them. You can enforce all of the compliance requirements that PCI cares about so that they can't be bypassed, so that you more get security by default, compliance by default, and then when you get an alarm, that's the exception. So you reduce human error when you introduce the automation, the automated guardrails, and that improves the speed in which you can monitor your environment, secure environment, and reduces the number of people that need to be sitting there watching an alarm, watching a dashboard of red versus green blinking lights. And you can free them up to work on the stuff that matters. I mean, working on improving your business, working on improving the security posture elsewhere. And to the third one, working on your boundary verification. In the cloud, you've got a lot of functionality. It's really easy, though, to not quite notice where your data boundary starts and stops. You get a lot of extra capability. You can expand your environment from one single server to 1 million servers across the world. You need to know where the boundaries do stop and start. PCI cares about it. Where does your scope start? What are the critical points in your CDE? The cloud providers offer tools to do that. You can do continuous monitoring of your data boundary so that you know where your requirements stop and where somebody else's begin. You know where your CDE actually lives. And then you can do the automated testing to give you that continuous sense of assurance and risk. And on that note, I want to go with some final thoughts. Biggest thing is take advantage of the capabilities your cloud providers offer. You have your business processes, you have your operations intimately intertwined with your cloud provider. There is some measure of vendor lock-in no matter what. Accept it and take advantage of it.
Thank you, Ted. So my takeaway is like, we live in a very complex world, so we cannot master everything. So we should get better at mastering collaboration.
Yeah, and finally, I think just mentioning all these existing resources, Ted touched on a few of them. I get really excited about machine language. We have a project CSA where we're looking at not only what are the controls that are being met, but what are the most return on the investment for each control. So if you have to do 300 plus cybersecurity controls in your environment, how do you know which ones are creating the most value for you as an organization? So a lot of good stuff there. Again, CSA has a lot of free resources on shared security responsibility and frameworks that associate with PCI DSS. So take advantage of all those free resources. And with that, we will also be free resources this week. So please, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, please find us in the hallway. Thank you.